recently Secretary who's Managing Director, Global Council for Ethics and Compliance at Accenture.
Good morning. Is everyone okay? Feeling good?
Yes.
So good morning to the organizers. Thank you for having me here again. And thank you to our panelists, speakers, for gracing today's event. I'd also like to say good morning to my colleagues, friends, former adversaries probably, and fellow survivors of boardroom meetings. I'm sure there are many of you here. The last time I stood before you was in 2023, and I had a brand new suit and a raging fever of over 40 degrees. I had myself discharged from the hospital against doctor's advice because I really wanted to be at the event. Because I promised to deliver the keynote, and I said I don't go back on my promises. And I told my doctor, hey, I eat dead legs and Thai foods for breakfast. What could the fever do to me? Well, 3 hours later, I was rushed back to the ER after my speech and received a very lengthy lecture from my oncologist. But today is very special because I'm strong and fit. I'm ready to hear from our panelists and to learn about the interesting topics that they're going to talk about today. And then later on in the afternoon, I hope you'll stay for my fireside chat with my friend, former adversary in many cases, but my litigation idol and also as a young lawyer, my fashion icon, Attorney Lorna Kapunan. When I started practicing law 30 years ago, and yes, I just aged myself, I could be your mom. My most advanced piece of technology was my secretary, Jeanette, because she could type over 60 words per minute. She could make the margins large enough so I could insert something in case I forgot, which was very often. And she did all this with a manual Olympia typewriter, carbon paper, and onion skin paper, and still managed to produce 6 copies of everything on time. And why do I mention this? Well, because today we're going to be immersing ourselves in developments in the legal field, but also in technology and artificial intelligence. So for the young people here, I wanted to kind of give you a taste or an idea of what it was like before all this technology came in. Most of you probably don't remember this, but as my daughters like to tell me, in the olden days, legal research meant actual books. There was no ChatGPT, there was no Google, we just had the scrap. Raise your hand if you've ever seen a scrap. Okay, good. It's nice to know I'm not alone. Back then, we had to handwrite our pleadings on, those yellow legal sheets, and then give them to the typing pool for them to type it up. And it was always a battle because everyone had a deadline. So you had to be extra nice to the typing pool or else your deadlines will really be dead. So we handwrote our pleadings, we redlined by hand, we faxed, we had an entire room dedicated to a telex machine, if you even know what that is. And then came WordStar, and I was so proud of my supposedly easy-to-carry laptop, which was about 20 pounds, and which I bought with my car loan. Not because it was an expensive computer, but because the car loan for my law firm was so tiny, that's all it could buy. The joys of being a junior associate, diba? So some of you are smiling now, I think, because you remember the blinking cursor of death. The one that pops up when you accidentally delete a pleading. Because that time, there was no auto-save, there was no auto-recover. If you saw the blinking cursor of death, you'd have to start over. In fact, at some point, you had to carry a floppy disk wherever you went because you needed to boot the computer to start the disk operating system. So we always had our own DOS. If someone had told me back then that a machine would one day be able to review 1,000 contracts faster than my junior associate could find the file I was looking for, I would have said that's science fiction. And then I probably would have said, I wonder how much we can bill per hour if we got it. Over the years, technology has come in waves. First, text messaging, email, changed the way we communicate. And gone were the days when your weekend was free because you had no cell phone, you had no email, and your boss could not possibly find you until Monday. Then came document management and e-discovery, and suddenly we could search terabytes of data in what seemed like a flash. And then robotic process automation quietly taking over the repetitive work and the drudgery. And then artificial intelligence. And all the myths and fears that come with it. And then there's Gen AI, and before we could even get used to Gen AI, agentic AI came along. Systems that don't just respond, but act, initiate. And we've gone from typing commands in WordStar to supervising digital agents that can actually draft and analyze contracts. And in a few months, maybe negotiate them for us. It has been extraordinary. But if we're honest, also a little bit unsettling. As General Counsel, you live right at that fault line, the one between innovation and accountability. You're asked to push transformation forward, but also manage the risk. You are the accelerator, but you're also the brakes, often at the same time. And by the way, that means you're expected to say yes faster, no more carefully, and still have everything ready for your boss to sign before Friday afternoon. AI today isn't just another efficient tool, it's an ecosystem shift. It predicts litigation outcomes, it can draft board memos, it can manage compliance in real time, and personalize experiences at scale. For your businesses, the upside is obvious. Speed, scale, cost savings, and insights into what drives your consumers. So yes, AI can also take away the drudgery for lawyers and give us back the time to do the things we went to law school to do, which is to analyze, strategize, and give counsel, not do repetitive work reviewing the same contracts over and over again. But despite all that, we need to talk honestly about the risks. Because if there's one thing you guys are genetically incapable of as general counsel, I think it's ignoring the existence of risk. After all, AI is trained in human data. And human data, as we know, is not infallible and not unbiased. In fact, in my old law firm, every time someone submitted a pleading for review to the senior associate and then the junior partner, it comes back and the fonts are different. If we cannot even agree on what font to use, how do we expect machines to be completely neutral? If data reflects historical inequities, the output will reflect them too. If systems are trained primarily on people who are normally able, always available, always at full health, then those systems may quietly fail everyone else. And quietly is the most dangerous part. I stand before you today not just as a lawyer of 30 years, but someone who is living with stage 4 cancer. And I tell you, that has changed the way I look at how systems are designed. When you live with a disability, whether temporary, permanent, apparent, or non-apparent, you become acutely aware of how the design went into something that you use. Is the platform accessible to someone who's visually impaired? Like me, without the contact lenses, I'd probably bump into this podium and think it was a man. Is the interface readable when you're tired because you're sick? Can speech to text understand what you're saying when you're having a bad day and groggy from meditation? Does the workflow assume that you have unlimited stamina and perfect health? Technology indeed can be liberating for many people, but it can also exclude politely, quietly, and at scale. Which is why my advocacy is that AI should be human-centric, not profit-centric, not cost-centric, but human-centric. And human should mean all humans, the diverse, the aging, the disabled, the neurodivergent. It should work across languages, cultures, and economic realities. If our AI tools are designed only for the fastest, healthiest, and most digitally fluent, then we're not building a future. We are narrowing it. So, as senior legal leaders here, you should be asking these questions now, not at rollout, not later on, not at the next board meeting. Now, who trained this data? On what data was it trained? Who was left out? Who benefits? And who ultimately bears the risk? Regulation is something I advocate because we have to believe that it is not the enemy of innovation. It is what makes innovation trustworthy for the greater world. We regulate pharmaceutical companies because their drugs affect human lives. We regulate financial markets because they affect human livelihood. And so we must also thoughtfully regulate AI because it affects autonomy, opportunity, and the dignity of work. That does not mean fear-based prohibition. All I'm advocating for are guardrails, transparency, accountability, and the ability to explain our decisions to someone who's not impressed or who doesn't even understand the tech buzzwords. Because when an algorithm makes a decision, there is a human behind it who approves that decision. And very often, that human is one of you. Yet, despite these cautions, I'm hopeful because I've also seen what technology can do. When chemotherapy leaves me fatigued, and AI transcription tools can capture my thoughts when my hands are too unsteady to type. And this is very useful because I usually get my brilliant ideas at some god-awful time of the day, or when the nurse is trying to insert a 2-inch long needle into my chest. When travel becomes difficult because of my disability, I can appear in rooms where I cannot physically enter. When cognitive fog creeps in from my treatments, there are tools that help summarize so I can stay on top of my game. Technology has not diminished my professional identity. It has extended it. For employees with disabilities, AI can be the ultimate equalizer. It can provide real-time captioning, adaptive interfaces, cognitive support, flexible workflow designs. It can allow someone who cannot commute to a physical location to contribute at the highest levels. And it can allow talent, not physical stamina, to define value. In some companies that are more progressive, if you're lucky, it can also allow someone living with a chronic illness to remain in a leadership position. Imagine compliance systems that adjust workloads during medical leave, recruitment algorithms that are trained not to immediately exclude resumes because there is a gap due to illness or because the person applying is disabled. There are now agentic AI assistants that can manage tasks proactively when the user capacity fluctuates. This is not science fiction. This is design choice. And the question is not whether AI will revolutionize our organizations because it already has. The question is, will we help shape it with intention? 30 years ago, I feared losing a documented North Star. Today, I fear losing something more valuable in our rush towards efficiency, our humanity. And I assure you, recovering that will going to be far more difficult than recovering a corrupted families. We are lawyers. You are stewards of governance. You are the translators between technology and trust. Let us insist that AI systems reflect the full diversity of the human condition. Let us not exclude. Let us build frameworks that can protect without paralyzing. And let us demand accessibility as a default, not as an afterthought. Let us train our teams not just to use AI, but to question it. And let us remember that progress is not measured only by speed, but by inclusion. If technology has taught me anything over the last 30 years, and if illness has taught me anything over the last few, human resilience is remarkable. Human ingenuity is powerful. And when you align those two with compassion and intent, it will amplify both. AI should not replace lawyers. It should support us. It should extend our capabilities. It should widen our circles. And we should fight for the things that lawyers have always valued: transparency, accountability, and the ability to explain your decisions. If we do this right, AI will not just revolutionize how you review or draft contracts. It will help ensure that a brilliant young lawyer will not have to choose between his health and his career. It will help ensure that leadership and experience is not lost due to illness. It will help ensure that dignity remains at the center of work. And that is a future worth building. And I, for one, and I hope all of you, will build it with me. To all of you who are here, I'm sure you're going to have a fantastic day of learning. And for everyone who stayed awake to the end of my speech, thank you very much. And someday I will owe you a drink. Everyone have a good day, and thank you very much.